Just trying to chill. I'm just trying to live a peaceful life. That's why I live in Ohio. You know, I live in a little town in Ohio. It must be like 3,700 people. Small hippie town. Culturally, it might feel like Ann Arbor to you. You know what I mean? Just a bunch of hippies and shit like that. And niggas always ask me, like, Dave, why you live in that hippie town? And I'd be embarrassed to tell them the truth. But you know why I live there? Because Yellow Springs, Ohio has the most beautiful women in the world. And a lot of people might disagree with me, but you gotta see them for yourself. They're gorgeous. But it all depends on what you're into, you know what I mean? I like white bitches with dirty feet. If I had a strip club in Yellow Springs, I would call that shit strippies. All naked hippies all the time. And I'd only hire girls with long titties and long vagina hair that looks like they slept on it. And I would keep a pile of dirt right next to the stage. I come like, bitch, get your feet in that dirt and get up there and give those people what they came to see. Chalk up, bitch. A couple years ago, I was in Ohio at a shopping mall. An old white lady, this is true, she was following me around the mall, which sounds paranoid, but I'm sure she was following me. Mean lady, too. You ever see a woman with lines on her face that just tell you, like, even if she smiled, it looked like it would hurt the muscles in her face? I knew she was following me because she was at places that had nothing to do with her. I'd be looking around like, what is this old bitch doing in GameStop and Foot Locker and all the places I like to go? Every time I see her, she'd just be looking at me on me. And eventually, I forgot about her. So then after I'm shopping, I go all the way to the back of the parking lot. I'm parked all the way in the back. And as soon as I open my car door, I hear a voice go, David Chappelle. Just like that. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was her. And I looked back, and sure enough, there she was, that face. To be honest with you, she probably wasn't even that old. She's probably around my age. But she was a white woman. This bitch looked terrible. I'm going all the way. I kept my cool. I was nice. I said, hello, miss. And she didn't say anything back. All she said was, I watch your comedy. I said, uh-oh. And then she says, it's true, she goes, it sounds to me like you hate women. I said, well, you know what, miss? It's art. And you're free to interpret this art however you'd like. But I can tell you, as the maker of this art, that I don't believe that I feel that way. And she said, well, I think, and I said, shut up, bitch. Shut the fuck up. Before I kill you and put you in the trunk, ain't nobody around here. I'm just kidding, I didn't say that. I felt that way, but that's not what I said. I was more clever than that. You know what I said? And this is exactly what I said. I said, miss, before you finish that statement, let me ask you a question. Where'd you see me? Did you buy a ticket to a concert I did? I doubt that. Or maybe you watched one of my specials on Netflix. Or did I follow you to your car and do my act? She said, what? I said, keep it in the comment section, bitch, this is real life. Ta-ta. And then I drove off. Now, I gotta tell you, and this is gonna surprise some people here, but not everybody. People say things to me all the time, but what you don't know is it does affect me. I think about it. And that one bothered me a lot. I was driving home, couldn't stop thinking about what this woman said because she's not the first woman that said that to me. It's puzzling. You know what I mean? Like, what could I possibly be saying that would make these bitches think I hate women? Couldn't figure it out. So you know what I did? I Googled the dictionary definition of a feminist just to make sure I was talking about the right thing. And do you know, sir, what the dictionary definition of a feminist is? I didn't either. Listen to this. Webster defines a feminist as a human being, not a woman, a human being that believes in equal rights for women. I was shocked that that's what that meant. Because by that definition, I would consider myself a feminist. And I didn't even know that at the time. All these years, I thought it meant frumpy dyke. Well, that's who's always talking to me, some chick in overalls. Men are trying to rape us. Ah, not you, bitch, me please. I know, look, listen. I support the feminist movement, I do, in my own ways. When you guys did the Women's March, I tried to go and support you. And none of my friends would go with me. I asked all the fellas, none of them wanted to go. I tried everything. Come on, y'all, it's gonna be bitches there. They was like, nope. So what I did is I called my friend Ange. Ange is a black woman who's a comedy writer, and she's dope. Matter of fact, she's the only woman that I know personally that pays her ex-husband alimony. And she sounds just like a man when she does it. Fuck that broke motherfucker and all that. She says all that shit. So I hit Ange up, and I hit her on the text. And all I did, I texted her, I said, Ange, are you going to the Women's March? And she texted me back, and this is a real text. She said, I hope those white bitches get tear gassed. There's a problem in that feminist movement, isn't there? From its inception in America, there's always been a racial component. When Susan B. Anthony was having that meeting and Sojourner Truth's black ass showed up, read your history books. All them white women asked Sojourner Truth not to speak. They didn't want to conflate the issues of women's rights and slavery. But you know how black bitches are. Sojourner Truth went up there anyway. She did a famous speech. She said, ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? That's right. And listen. I supported the Me Too movement, but the whole time, I thought that the way they handled that was stupid. It was white. It was like, they were doing shit like going to the Golden Globes, and all of them would be like, let's all go to the Golden Globes and wear black dresses, give these men a piece of our minds. Bitch, that is not gonna work. You think Martin Luther King's gonna be like, I want everybody to keep riding the bus, but wear matching outfits? You gotta get off the bus and walk. It's real talk. Real talk, that was a silly movement. I want everybody to wear a crocheted pussy hat so they know we're serious. What the fuck was y'all doing? And then I said something about it in one of my specials, and all these women actresses came after me. I said, man, fuck y'all too, you canceled. I ain't jerking off to none of your pictures again. They were like, who is he to tell us anything? I'll tell you exactly who I am. I'm the one that got off the bus and left $50 million on the bus and walked. I agreed with these women. I just didn't agree with what they were doing about it. Right. No, it was annoying as fuck. Because if these women were serious, you know what they would have done? They all would have fired their agents. And they would have went to the mailroom of one of these big agencies and found a woman that was busting her hump in there and said, if you want to talk to us, then you have to talk to her. And if they did that, then she would be big and they would be big and nobody would get fed to Harvey Weinstein. But did they do that? No. Was that their idea? No. Surprisingly, it was mine. And what I think the feminist movement needs to be very successful is a male leader. I'll do it. I will. I will lead you women to the promised land. I will make sure you get equal pay for equal work. I will make sure that nobody harasses you or fucks with you on the job. I will protect all of your interests. And all that I ask for in return is that you suck my dick. And now we're right back to square one, aren't we?
Here is a 30-minute commentary from a woman watching the video titled Dave Chappelle on Why I Really Love Ohio. I found this clip late last night, and I've been thinking about it ever since. The title is simple enough, Dave Chappelle on Why I Really Love Ohio. And if you only know Dave from the early specials, the ones where he's in San Francisco or New York, wearing that leather jacket, doing the Rick James thing, you might think this is going to be a joke. You might think, oh, he's going to make fun of Ohio. He's going to talk about cornfields and snow and how boring it is. But that's not what this is. This isn't a joke. This is a love letter, and it's a confession. He walks out, and right away there's a different energy about him. He's not in a club in Manhattan, he's on a stage somewhere, and the backdrop is simple, but he has this ease to him. He's wearing a hoodie, I think, or something casual. He looks comfortable. Not comfortable like a performer who knows his material, comfortable like a man who just walked in from his backyard. And he sits down and he doesn't do the big bombastic opening. He just looks out and says, I live in Ohio. I live in a little town called Yellow Springs, and people always ask me, Dave, why? Why would you live there? You could live anywhere. You could live in Paris. You could live in Malibu. You could live on a private island. Why Ohio? And he pauses. And in that pause, you can see him actually considering the question, even though he's probably been asked it 1,000 times. He's not giving a rehearsed answer. He's reaching for something deeper. He takes a breath and says, because Ohio is quiet. And I needed quiet. Now, I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm thinking about noise. Not just the noise of traffic or cities, but the noise of expectation. The noise of people telling you who you are. Dave Chappelle, at the height of his fame, walked away from $50 million. $50 million. And he went home to Ohio. And for years, people called him crazy. They said he threw it away. They said he lost his mind. But listening to him talk now, you realize he didn't lose his mind. He was trying to save it. He starts talking about what it feels like to be famous. And he does this thing with his hands, like he's trying to hold on to something that's slipping away. He says, when you become famous, you stop being a person. You become a thing. You become a symbol. People look at you and they don't see you. They see what they want to see. They see their hopes, their dreams, their anger, their whatever. And you're standing there, just trying to be a human being, and they're projecting a movie onto your chest. And I've heard famous people talk about this before. The loss of self, the weirdness of being recognized everywhere. But Dave puts it differently. He puts it in terms of geography. He says, in New York or LA, I couldn't just be Dave. I was always Dave Chappelle, the guy from the show, the guy from the thing. Everywhere I went, someone wanted something. A picture, a conversation, a piece of advice, a piece of my energy. And I was giving it. I was giving it until I didn't have anything left for myself. He takes a sip of water, or maybe it's tea, something non-alcoholic, I notice. There's a sobriety to his demeanor, not just in his drink, but in his spirit. He's clear-eyed. He says, so I went home. I went back to Ohio. And do you know what happened? I went to the grocery store, and nobody bothered me. I went to the diner, and the waitress called me hun, and asked if I wanted my eggs scrambled. She didn't ask me about the show. She didn't ask me about the money. She asked me about my eggs, and I almost cried. And the audience laughs, but it's a soft laugh, a knowing laugh, because there's something profoundly sad in that, isn't there? That a man who had everything the world tells you to want, fame, fortune, adoration, almost cried over being treated like a regular person ordering breakfast. He goes deeper into this. He starts talking about the land. He talks about his farm, the acres of land he owns in Yellow Springs, and he describes it in a way that's almost poetic. He talks about the way the light hits the fields in the morning, the way the fog sits in the valleys, the way the seasons change. He says, in Ohio, you feel the earth. You feel the winter coming, you feel the thaw, you feel the ground under your feet, and you remember that you're just a creature. You're just a man, not a brand, not an icon, just a man walking on dirt. And I'm thinking about how disconnected we all are from that. From dirt, from seasons, from the simple act of being a creature on a planet. We live in screens and cities and artificial light, and we wonder why we feel unmoored. Dave found his mooring in Ohio. He found it in the soil. He starts telling a story about a moment that changed him. He talks about being in his backyard, late at night, couldn't sleep. This was years ago, maybe around the time he first walked away from the show. He says he was sitting on his porch, wrestling with all the noise in his head. The contracts, the lawyers, the people calling him crazy, the voices telling him he ruined his life. And he says he looked up at the sky, and because he's in Ohio, because he's not in a city with all that light pollution, he could see the stars, all of them, a whole sky full of stars. And he says, I sat there looking at those stars, and I realized how small I was, not in a bad way. I realized that all that stuff, the show, the money, the drama, it was all happening on this tiny little speck of dust, floating in an infinite darkness. And the stars didn't care. The stars didn't know who I was. The stars didn't know what a television was. And I just sat there. And for the first time in years, I stopped thinking. I just sat, and I breathed, and I felt the night air. And I was okay. He looks at the audience, and his eyes are a little wet. He's not crying, but he's there. He's present. He says, that's why I love Ohio. Because Ohio lets me see the stars. Because Ohio lets me be small. Now, I'm thinking about my own life. I live in a city. I live in an apartment where I can see the building across the street, but I can't see the sky. And I'm realizing that I haven't looked at the stars in years. Not really. Not like that. And I'm wondering if that's part of why I feel the way I feel sometimes. That constant low-grade anxiety. The feeling that I'm supposed to be doing something, achieving something, becoming something. Maybe I just need to be small for a while. Dave shifts gears a little. He starts talking about the people in Ohio. And this is where the comedian comes back out a little bit. He does a bit about the difference between how people treat you in LA versus how they treat you in Ohio. He says, in LA, someone sees you. They immediately calculate your value. What can you do for me? Who do you know? How much are you worth? In Ohio, someone sees you. They calculate if you need help changing a tire. That's the math. That's the only math. He talks about his neighbors. He doesn't name them, but you can tell he loves them. He talks about an old farmer down the road who for the first 5 years Dave lived there called him the young fella and never once mentioned that he was famous. And then one day, the farmer's tractor broke down and Dave helped him fix it. And after they finished, the farmer looked at him and said, "You're all right, young fella. You're all right." And Dave says, "That was the best review I ever got. Better than any critic, better than any award. A man who fixes tractors told me I was all right." And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Validation from people who don't care about your status. Being seen for who you are, not what you've done. Dave found a place where his fame was irrelevant. And that irrelevance, that lack of reflection, allowed him to actually become a person again. Not a symbol, a person. He talks about raising his kids in Ohio. And this is where I really lean in, because I think about what it means to raise children outside of the circus. He says, my kids, they don't know me as Dave Chappelle the comedian. They know me as Dad. And in Ohio, they can just be kids. They can ride their bikes. They can get muddy. They can make mistakes. without it ending up on the internet. They can have a childhood, a real one, not a curated one, not a branded one, just a childhood. He talks about the schools in Yellow Springs. He talks about the community. He talks about how his kids have friends whose parents are professors, farmers, mechanics, artists. He says, my kids know all kinds of people. They know people who have PhDs and people who didn't finish high school, and they treat them the same. Because in Ohio, you learn that a person's worth isn't in their resume. It's in their character. It's in how they show up when things get hard. He tells a story about a winter storm that knocked out the power for a week. And he says, you want to know what happened? The neighbors came out. We shoveled each other's driveways. We shared food. We brought firewood to the old folks. Nobody asked what anybody did for a living. Nobody asked how much money you had. We just took care of each other. Because that's what you do when the power goes out. You remember that you need each other. And I'm sitting here in my apartment with the Wi-Fi and the central heating, and I'm realizing that I don't know my neighbors. I've lived here for 3 years, and I couldn't tell you the names of the people in the apartment next to me. And Dave is describing a world that feels almost ancient, a world of mutual aid and actual community, and he found it in Ohio. He found it by going home. He talks about the racial dynamics too. He doesn't shy away from it. He talks about being a black man in a small town in Ohio. And he says, people think Ohio is just cornfields and white people. And there's plenty of that. But there's also Yellow Springs. And Yellow Springs is this little pocket of something else. It's a town that was part of the Underground Railroad. It's a town that has a history of abolitionists and activists and people who believed in something bigger than themselves. It's a town where a black man can walk down the street and people see him as a neighbor, not as a threat. Not all the time, not perfectly, but more than anywhere else I've been. He talks about the sense of belonging, and he says, you know what belonging feels like? It feels like being able to be quiet. You don't have to perform. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to be the representative of your race or your profession or your generation. You can just be. And that's what Ohio gave me. It gave me the space to just be. He goes back to the fame thing for a minute. He talks about how people in Ohio handled his success, or his notoriety, or whatever you want to call it. He says, when I came back, when I walked away from the show, everybody in New York and LA was saying I was crazy. The tabloids were saying I was on drugs. The industry was saying I was difficult. And in Ohio, my neighbors brought me casseroles. They brought me casseroles because they thought I was sick. They didn't think I was crazy. They thought, oh, the young fella must be going through something. Let's bring him a hot meal. He laughs here, and it's a genuine laugh, a laugh of gratitude. He says, that's the difference. In one world, you're a headline. In the other world, you're a neighbor who might need some chicken and rice. And I'll take the chicken and rice every time. He gets quiet again, and this is where the weight of the story really lands. He says, I love Ohio because Ohio saved my life. And I don't say that lightly. I say that as a fact. If I had stayed in LA, if I had stayed in New York, if I had stayed in that whirlwind, I wouldn't be here right now. I would have been consumed. I would have become one of those stories. The one where they say, remember him? He had it all, and then he trails off. He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't have to. We all know what comes after the and then. We've seen it 100 times. The artists who burn out, the stars who flame out, the people who get eaten by the machine that they thought they were building.
He says, Ohio gave me a place to land. It gave me a place to heal. It gave me a place to remember who I was before anybody knew my name. And that's the thing. You have to remember who you were before the world told you who you were supposed to be. And you can't do that in the middle of the noise. You have to find somewhere quiet. You have to find your Ohio, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's a small town. Maybe it's a cabin in the woods. Maybe it's just a room in your house where you turn off the phone and sit. But you have to find it, because if you don't, the world will take everything from you. Not your money or your stuff. It will take you. It will take your soul. He takes a breath. He looks out at the audience, and you can tell they're not laughing anymore. They're listening. They're leaning forward. He says, I'm not saying Ohio is perfect. It's not. There's cold winters. There's potholes. There's politics I don't agree with. There's all the stuff that comes with anywhere. But it's mine. It's the place I chose. And choosing it, choosing to be there,
choosing to stay there when everybody said I should leave. Because every day, when I wake up in that house, on that land, in that town, I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing my kids. I'm choosing my life over my legacy. He says, legacy is for dead people. I'm alive. I want to live, and living means being somewhere you can breathe. Living means being somewhere you can walk into a diner and just be a person ordering eggs. Living means looking at the stars and feeling small and being okay with that. He stands up. He doesn't do a big closing joke. He just says, that's why I love Ohio. Because Ohio loves me back. Not the idea of me, not the comedian, not the icon. Just me. Just Dave. And that's enough. That's more than enough. And then he walks off. And the audience applauds. But it's not the applause you give for a punchline. It's the applause you give for truth. It's the applause you give when someone says something that you've been feeling but haven't been able to put into words. I'm sitting here, hours later, and I'm still thinking about it. I'm thinking about my own life. I'm thinking about the noise I've been living in. The notifications, the deadlines, the endless scroll, the feeling that I'm supposed to be building something, becoming something, proving something. And I'm wondering what my Ohio is. Where is the place where I can be small? Where is the place where I can see the stars? I don't have an answer yet. But I think that's the point. Dave didn't have an answer either, until he went and found it. He didn't find it in a book, or a podcast, or a guru. He found it in the dirt. He found it in the quiet. He found it by leaving the thing everybody told him to stay in. And maybe that's the lesson. Not that we all need to move to Ohio, but that we all need to find our version of it. The place, or the practice, or the people. The place where nobody wants anything from us except to know how we like our eggs. The place where we can look at the stars and remember that we're just creatures on a speck of dust. And that's actually a relief, not a disappointment. So that's my commentary. That's what I've been sitting with. I think I'm going to turn off my phone now. I think I'm going to try to find a patch of sky, even if it's just from my fire escape, even if the city lights drown most of it out. I'm going to look up, and I'm going to try to be small for a while.
I was doing a nightclub in Oakland 16 years ago, and this is the first time that the trans community ever got mad at me that I knew about. And I was nobody. I just quit Chappelle's show. It was like a nothing hole-in-the-wall club, and I was doing some transgender jokes in Oakland. It was 16 years ago. My pronoun game was not as nice as it is today. I went too far. I said things like tranny and shit. I didn't know these words were bad, and a woman stood up and just gave me the business, started screaming at me, and I'm sure it was a woman, but she kept calling me transphobic and all this shit. I'd never even heard these words before. It's really weird. I didn't trip. I just gave security the look like, get that bitch out of here. And I kept it moving. And then she went to the press. And the next day, one of the gay papers wrote all the same things she had said to me about me in the paper. Misquoted the jokes and was calling me transphobic. And again, all these words, I'd never heard them before. But every time that I talked with anybody from that community since, they always repeat the talking points from that article. My least favorite of which being, and I hate this phrase, they say I was punching down on them. Punching down. The fuck does that mean? Now fast forward. It's 2019. I'm in a restaurant in Ohio, a very nice restaurant. It's Thanksgiving week. And to be honest, it's not a very nice restaurant, but it's a nice restaurant if you're a white person from Ohio that's never been anywhere before. Picture Chili's. I'm sitting at the bar, I'm having a drink by myself, and the only other person in the bar is a woman, a couple stools down, and she was alone, and she was older, and that made me feel sad because it was the holidays. So I told the bartender, send that woman a drink on me. She's trying to spread the cheer. And I wish I didn't. This woman wanted to talk. She wasn't mean, she was nice, but she just wanted to talk about shit that, the nigga that's trying to get drunk don't want to hear about this bitch remodeling her bathroom. And I'm sitting there trying to be polite. Oh, Subway towels, word. But then she hits a lick, piqued my interest. She says, my daughter is coming home for the holidays. Oh, that's great news. I'm glad you're not going to be alone. And then she goes on and on about how great her daughter is. I guess her daughter got a new agent, and she's out in Hollywood. She's in movies and on television and all this stuff. And as she's telling me this, I'm thinking, this woman is so sweet. She probably doesn't even know who I am or what I do for a living. Because I know what your daughter's out in Hollywood doing. And then she goes, would you like to see her picture? Oh, now I don't want to see this woman's picture, but what am I going to do? I go, okay, yeah, sure, I'd love to see the picture. And I grab the picture, and this is all I say. Oh, she's very beautiful. And as she puts the picture away, she looks mean all of a sudden, like she caught me in some kind of trap. What does that face mean? And then she goes, she's transgender. And I think to myself, oh, this bitch does know who I am. I really resented that trap because that trap doesn't let me be honest. If I was honest, I wouldn't fall for it. I just looked at the picture like, ooh, look at that big chiseled jawline, that big thick Joe Rogan neck. Is that a dude? Is your daughter a man? Can't say that shit. It's really annoying. Fast forward, now it's a couple days later. It's the Wednesday. For the Thursday, that's Thanksgiving, and I'm in a totally different bar. And this bar, trust me, it's not a nice place. It's foul. It's one of those bars where the top shelf should be under the sink. This is where the poor whites drink, the tiki torch whites. You know what I mean? Them white people, they believe in Q and they love Trump. You know what I mean? Like Michigan white people. I remember I was at this bar one time. This is that kind of bar it is. I was in there one time, I was fucked up. And I turned around to everybody in the bar, I go, hey, everybody, I'm gonna buy everyone in the bar around the drinks. And all the motherfuckers like, hoorah! And the bartender knew I was drunk, so she pulled me aside. Mr. Chappelle, are you sure about that? That's going to be $16. Tough time for the whites. And this was a holiday weekend, you know what I mean? These motherfuckers was having a rootin' tootin' time. They was in there partying, making all them noises. Woo! Ow! Yow! You know all them noises white people make before lynching? They was doing all that shit. I was drunk. I looked over my shoulder. I thought I was tripping. I guess who was in the bar? I thought I was seeing things. I looked across the room and I saw the trans bitch from the picture. I couldn't believe it. I said, what is a trans person doing in a place like this? This is very dangerous behavior. And she was with two big, buff, gay black dudes. I didn't know these dudes, but I know they was gay. If they had a dick in their mouth, they wouldn't look any gayer than they did just sitting there. They had 1980s gay face. You know what that is? Remember in the 80s when gay people looked surprised all the time? Close your mouth, nigga. What's surprising? You know what I mean? But they was huge. They looked like Juicy Smouille's trainers. And I'm thinking, man, these motherfuckers in a line of trouble. So what I do is I stand up, and everybody in the bar likes me, so I make a big show of it to make sure that everyone can hear me. I walk right up to her, and I go, hey, I just met your mother the other night, and she told me all the great things you're doing in Hollywood, and I cannot believe that someone from a podunk place like this can achieve all that. I'm so proud of you. Welcome home. And the whole bar said, hoorah. And I said, whoosh. That ought to buy her some time. You know what I mean? A couple more drinks and these fellas are gonna start asking her for some pussy she might not have. And she was very gracious. She said, thank you so much. And we shook hands. And as she was shaking my hand, her face turned mean, like her mom's. And she said, do you mind not punching down on my people? Oh, I don't like that. Normally I would have let it go, but I was drunk. I said, what might you mean, bitch? I was careful to call her a bitch because I didn't want to blow her cover. Turns out she wasn't hiding. She was loud, she was proud. She let me have it in front of everybody, screaming at me all the talking points from that article. You transphobic, this and that. Kept clapping her hands in my face. Let me tell you something. I said, where you learned this from? Black bitches kept doing, let me tell you something, honey. So annoying. She kept calling transgenders her people. Isn't that weird? My people this, my people that. I said, what do you mean your people? Was y'all kidnapped in Transylvania and brought here as slaves? She said, my people have struggled for decades, honey. Decades. And I looked at them gay black dudes like, is there anything you niggas need to tell this bitch? Clifford. I'm exaggerating. She's actually a very nice person, and I'm cool with her now, but boy, that shit got on my nerves. And it got on my nerves because whenever someone says that to me, I know they've never seen me for themselves. They just repeat what they've heard. Any of you who have ever watched me know that I have never had a problem with transgender people. If you listen to what I'm saying, clearly, my problem has always been with white people. I have been arguing with the whites my entire career. And just when I thought I had you guys on the ropes, you changed all the rules. Oh, yeah? Yeah, motherfucker. Well, I'm a girl now, nigger, and you must treat me as such. Call me a girl, nigger. It's annoying as fuck. No. Go back tonight after the show. Watch every special I did on Netflix. Listen to everything I ever said about that community. I'll go through them. I said, how much do I have to participate in your self-image? I said, you shouldn't discuss this in front of black people. I said, I know niggas in Brooklyn that wear high heels just to feel safe. I asked you, why is it easier for Bruce Jenner to change his gender than it is for Cassius Clay to change his name? If you listen to what I'm saying, I'm not even talking about them, I'm talking about us, and they don't listen. It's very annoying. And they've canceled people that are more powerful than me. They canceled J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her. And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually, she said gender was a fact. And then the trans community got mad as shit. They started calling her a TERF. I didn't even know what the fuck that was. But I know that trans people make up words to win arguments. So I looked it up. TERF is an acronym. Stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. This is a real thing. This is a group of women that hate transgender. They don't hate transgender women, but they look at trans women the way we blacks might look at blackface. It offends them. Like, ooh, this bitch is doing an impression of me. Now, I shouldn't speak on this because I am not a woman, nor am I a trans. But as we've established, I am a feminist. That's right. I'm Team TERF. I agree, man. Gender is a fact. You have to look at it from a woman's perspective. Look at it like this. Caitlyn Jenner, whom I've met, wonderful person, Caitlyn Jenner was voted Woman of the Year. Her first year as a woman. Ain't that something? Beat every bitch in Detroit, she's better than all of you. Never even had a period. Ain't that something? Oh, I'd be mad as shit if I was a woman. I'd be mad if I was me. If I was in a BET Awards sitting there and they're like, and the winner for Nigger of the Year, Eminem, my man. Gender is a fact. This is a fact. Every human being in this room, every human being on earth had to pass through the legs of a woman to be on earth. That is a fact. Now, I am not saying that to say that trans women aren't women. I am just saying that those pussies that they got, you know what I mean? I'm not saying it's not pussy, but that's like beyond pussy or impossible pussy. You know what I mean? It tastes like pussy, but that's not quite what it is it? It's not blood, that's beet juice. Oh, buddy, I'm in trouble now.
So, I'm sitting here on my couch. It's late, and I stumble across this video. The title alone, whew, you know, it's one of those things where you already feel the tension before you even press play. And I think, all right, let's do this. Let's sit in the discomfort. Because that's what comedy is supposed to do, right? Or at least that's what we used to say before everything became a battleground. The video starts with a clip of a stand-up special. Dim lights, a single stool, water bottle on the floor. That familiar vibe. And the person on stage, let's just call him a legendary comedian. Someone who's been called a voice of a generation, but also someone who's been accused of punching down. And he launches into a bit about trans people. Immediately, the audience is nervous. You can hear it. That one guy who laughs too loud, then stops. The scattered claps. He starts talking about trans privilege. And my first reaction is, my eyebrows go up. Because privilege is a loaded word. Usually we hear it in the context of race, class, gender. Things you're born into. So hearing trans privilege feels like a twist. He's not saying trans people have it easy. He's saying in his view, there's a specific kind of social power that comes with being trans in certain spaces. Like the ability to command language, to shift conversations, to demand recognition overnight. And I'm listening, trying to separate the joke from the point. A trans woman says something controversial, and instead of debating the idea, people are afraid to criticize because they don't want to be called transphobic. That's the kernel of his argument. Now, do I agree? Partially. I've seen online mobs attack someone for a clumsy pronoun mistake. But is that privilege? Or is that just a fragile early-stage respect that can vanish the second you step out of line? Real privilege doesn't disappear when you lose an argument. Then he pivots. And this is where the title's second half comes in. He brings up a certain famous Olympic athlete turned reality TV star who transitioned later in life. And he compares her to a famous white rapper from Detroit. And I pause the video. I'm like, what? How do those two things connect? So I take a breath and press play again. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, Caitlyn Jenner is like Eminem because they both had to prove themselves to a community that didn't originally accept them. For Eminem, it was hip-hop. A white kid from a trailer park, battling in black spaces, earning respect through sheer skill and audacity. For Caitlyn Jenner, he argues, it was womanhood. He says she had to learn how to be a woman. Just like Eminem had to learn how to rap in a culture not his own. And I'm sitting here, and I'm trying not to laugh, but also trying not to get angry. Because on one hand, I see the analogy. Both are latecomers to an identity that others were born into. Both face skepticism. Both had to perform, to prove, to grind. But on the other hand, one is a musical genre, and the other is a lived, embodied gender. You can stop rapping. You can't stop being a woman. And comparing the two feels reductive, even if the comedian's intent is to humanize, not mock. He's not just making a joke. He's making a point about who gets to claim authenticity. He says, if Eminem had come out and said, I'm the realest rapper, respect my pronouns, without putting in the work, he'd have been laughed off stage. And then he turns to Caitlyn Jenner. He implies that some trans women expect immediate acceptance without going through the awkward phase of learning makeup, voice, walk, social cues. And that's where I start to feel uncomfortable. Because who decides what the work is? Are we talking about passing? Are we talking about suffering? There's a long, painful history of trans people having to perform gender perfectly just to avoid violence. And here's a very rich, very famous, very white trans woman being held up as an example. But most trans people aren't Caitlyn Jenner. Most are just trying to live, get a job, see a doctor, not get harassed at a bus stop. So the comedian's critique lands differently depending on who you are. To some in the audience, he's saying, hey, trans people can be privileged too. Stop acting like every criticism is hate. To others, he's using a wealthy outlier to dismiss real systemic barriers. And I think that's the problem with a lot of his recent material. He's brilliant at finding the contradiction, but sometimes he mistakes contradiction for equivalence. Then he goes further. He says, I'm Team TERF. And I know he's joking, but the room goes cold. For those who don't know, TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. It's a slur within the trans community for feminists who reject trans women as women. And he says it with a smirk. The audience doesn't know whether to cheer or boo. Some do both. And I'm thinking, this is the moment where a comedian stops commenting on culture and starts weaponizing his platform. Because here's the thing. He's an artist. But art has consequences. And when you say I'm Team TERF in a special that millions will watch, you're not just making a joke about hypocrisy. You're aligning yourself with a movement that has lobbied to keep trans women out of shelters, out of sports, out of bathrooms. You're giving cover to real harm. And I don't think he's evil. I think he's frustrated. He feels like he can't say anything without being policed. And instead of finding new, clever ways to critique power, he's punching sideways at a group that's already exhausted. Now, back to the comparison. Caitlyn Jenner versus Eminem. Let's sit with that for a minute. Eminem, at his peak, was controversial for raping his mum in lyrics, for homophobic slurs, for violence against women. But he grew. He apologized. He changed. He made a song about loving his gay fans. He evolved. Caitlyn Jenner, on the other hand, is a Republican who opposes trans youth healthcare, who said she didn't want trans girls competing in sports, who voted for someone actively hostile to trans rights. So the comedian comparing them, is he praising Eminem's growth or mocking Jenner's lack of solidarity? I think he's doing both. And that's his genius and his flaw. He wants to hold everyone accountable. But in doing so, he flattens nuance. Jenner isn't a symbol of all trans women. Eminem isn't a symbol of all white rappers. Yet the comparison works as a joke because our brains love patterns. Two outsiders, two late bloomers, two people who had to earn belonging. But the stakes are wildly different. No one died because Eminem had a bad album. Trans women die because they aren't seen as real women. And that's the heart of it. Privilege. The comedian says trans people have privilege because they can accuse you of bigotry and ruin your career. But let's be honest. How many careers have actually been ruined? A few YouTubers, a couple of journalists, some random tweets. Meanwhile, trans people face eviction, job loss, medical denial, murder. That's not privilege. That's a fragile, conditional, often performative power in online spaces, paid for with real-world danger. So when he laughs about trans privilege, I get the joke. The joke is about hypocrisy within progressive circles. The joke is about a trans woman who screams transphobia at a lesbian who won't date her. That's a real, small, annoying thing that happens. But he magnifies that small thing until it obscures the larger truth. And that's the danger of comedy from a position of power. You can accidentally convince people that the exception is the rule. I think about the young trans people watching this. Not the activists, not the Twitter warriors. Just a kid in a small town watching a legend mock their existence for applause. That kid might laugh along to fit in, or they might turn off the TV and feel smaller. And the comedian would say, "It's just jokes. I'm not your enemy." And he's not. But jokes live in the world. They reinforce what's acceptable to laugh at. And that's the paradox. We need comedy to challenge orthodoxy. We need someone to say the uncomfortable thing. But when the uncomfortable thing becomes trans people are faking it for attention, or they have more power than you, that's not satire. That's just recycling old bigotry with a clever smirk. The best comedy punches up, not down. And who is up here? A billionaire comedian on Netflix versus a community fighting for basic healthcare. That's not a fair fight. So where does that leave me after 30 minutes of watching and thinking? I don't have a clean answer. I love the comedian's old stuff. The razor-sharp observations about race, class, fame. It feels like he's mad that language changed while he wasn't looking. And instead of adapting, he's doubling down. The Caitlyn Jenner-Eminem comparison is funny for about 5 seconds. Then it falls apart under any real scrutiny. But maybe that's the point. Maybe comedy isn't supposed to hold up to scrutiny. Maybe it's just a mirror held up to our own confusion. And right now, we're all confused about gender, about privilege, about who gets to speak and who gets to laugh. So I close the video. I sit in silence for a minute. And I realize the most honest reaction I have is discomfort. Not outrage, not agreement, just discomfort. And maybe that's the only honest place to start a conversation. Because if you're not uncomfortable, you're not paying attention. And if you're only uncomfortable, you're not doing anything about it. So I guess the question is, so I'm going to tell you exactly what went through my head while watching this video. The title was Dave Chappelle on Trans Privilege and compares Caitlyn Jenner to Eminem. And before I even clicked, I had to take a breath. Because I knew this wasn't going to be light. This wasn't going to be a quick 5-minute laugh and then on with my day. This was going to sit on my chest for a while. And I was right. I press play. And it's a stage. Wood floor, brick wall, that low amber lot. The kind of light that makes everything feel like a secret. The comedian walks out, slow, hands in his pockets, and the crowd already has that electric hum. He takes a sip of water, puts the bottle down just so, and then he starts. He doesn't jump right into trans stuff. He warms up, talks about the pandemic, talks about cancel culture, talks about how he almost lost his career over a joke, and the crowd is with him. They're nodding. They're the choir. But then he pivots. He says the word trans, and you can feel the temperature change. Not drop, change. Like a room that suddenly remembers it has a thermostat. He says, I'm not afraid of trans people. I'm afraid of your reaction to me talking about trans people. And that's clever. That's really clever. Because now he's not attacking a group. He's attacking the audience's fear. He's making us the problem. And half the crowd laughs nervously. The other half claps. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this is how he gets away with it. He wraps the punchline in a layer of self-awareness. Then he says the phrase, trans privilege. And I have to pause the video for real. Not because I'm offended, but because I need to understand what he means by those two words together. Because privilege, as I learned it, is systemic. It's unearned. It's the air you breathe without noticing. White privilege means you don't get followed in stores. Male privilege means you're taken seriously in meetings. Straight privilege means you can hold your partner's hand in public without a second thought. So what the hell is trans privilege? I unpause. He explains. He says trans privilege is the ability to demand that everyone use your new name and pronouns immediately, without question, or else you're a bigot. He says it's the power to get someone fired for a single misstep. And he gives an example. A story about a friend of his, a trans woman, who allegedly used that power to silence criticism. And I'm listening, but I'm also thinking, that's not privilege. That's leverage. And leverage is fragile. Leverage disappears the moment you're alone in a parking lot, or a hospital bed, or a police station. But I keep watching, because I want to give him space.
Comedy is allowed to exaggerate. Comedy is allowed to take a tiny truth and blow it up like a balloon until it pops. So I stay with him. Then he brings up the Olympic athlete, the one who became a reality TV star, the one with the famous family and the car accident and the magazine cover. And he doesn't say her name with cruelty. He says it almost gently, like he's about to make an observation, not an attack. He says she had to learn how to be a woman, just like Eminem had to learn how to be a rapper. And I have to pause again, because now I'm curious. I'm not angry yet. I'm just curious. How are those two things the same? One is a white kid from Detroit, who proved himself in a black art form. One is a former Olympian, who transitioned at 65 after a lifetime of male privilege. One earned respect through battle raps and raw talent. One earned respect through athletic dominance, and then asked the world to see her differently. Where is the overlap? He says the overlap is proving yourself to a community that didn't invite you. Eminem had to prove himself to hip-hop. Caitlyn Jenner had to prove herself to womanhood. And I sit back. Okay, I see the skeleton of the analogy, but the flesh is missing. Because here's the thing about womanhood. It's not a club with an entrance exam. You don't audition. You don't battle. You don't submit a mixtape. Womanhood is something you are, not something you earn. And that's where the analogy starts to creak. For Eminem, hip-hop was an external culture. He could study it, practice it, fail at it, succeed at it, and eventually be accepted or rejected. For a trans woman, her identity isn't external, it's internal. She's not trying to join womanhood, she's trying to live her womanhood without being killed for it. The comedian then says something that sticks with me. He says, if Eminem had walked into a room full of black rappers and said, I'm the realist, respect my pronouns, don't question me, he would have been laughed out. And the crowd laughs. They get it. The point is about humility. The point is about earning your place. But I'm sitting here thinking, trans women don't ask for respect because they think they're perfect. They ask for respect because the alternative is often violence. Eminem didn't get shot for a bad verse. Trans women get shot for using the wrong bathroom. And this is where my own history starts to creep in. I remember being a teenager and not knowing any trans people. Or maybe I did, but they weren't out. I remember the first time I heard the word transgender on a talk show, and it was treated like a freak show. I remember thinking, that's brave, and also, that's terrifying. And now, decades later, we're having this national argument about who gets to be a woman, who gets to speak, who gets to joke. The comedian says he's not against trans people. He says he has trans friends. And I believe him. But I also know that having a friend doesn't make you immune to saying harmful things. My mother loves me, and she said some wildly off-base things about my life. Love doesn't equal understanding, and comedy doesn't equal truth. He then goes into this long bit about pronouns. He says, I'll call you whatever you want, but don't get mad if I mess up. And that sounds reasonable. It sounds like basic human decency. But then he adds, and don't expect me to pretend that a man in a wig is the same as a woman born with ovaries. And the crowd erupts. Some cheers, some groans. And I realize he's not trying to bridge a gap. He's trying to hold his ground. And his ground is biological sex is real, and you can't joke about it without being called a monster. But here's the problem. No one is saying biological sex isn't real. What trans people are saying is that gender is more than biology. It's also an identity, expression, social role, and lived experience. And the comedian knows that. He's smart. He's read things. He's talked to people. So why does he keep returning to this man in a wig framing? Because it's funny to some people. Because it's a punchline that works in a room full of people who feel left behind by the culture wars. He's not speaking to trans people. He's speaking to the people who are tired of being corrected. And that's where the comparison to the racer and the rapper gets really interesting. Eminem was an outsider who listened. He studied the culture he wanted to join. He took criticism. He changed his lyrics when he realized he'd gone too far. He apologized to his mother. He apologized to gay fans. He grew up in public. The Olympic athlete? She hasn't done that. She's doubled down on conservative politics. She said trans girls shouldn't play sports. She's aligned herself with people who want to erase her own community. So when the comedian compares them, is he praising the rapper's evolution or mocking the athlete's stubbornness? I think he's doing both. And I think he's also doing something else. I think he's using the athlete as a shield. He's saying, see, even a famous trans person doesn't agree with the activists. So why am I the bad guy? But that's not fair. One trans celebrity with bad politics doesn't represent all trans people any more than one racist comedian represents all comedians. And the comedian knows that too. He's too smart not to know. So why does he do it? Why does he hold up the least sympathetic trans person he can find and say, this is your champion? Because it's easy. Because it gets laughs. Because it lets him avoid the harder, messier truth that most trans people are just trying to live. They're not activists. They're not on Twitter. They're working retail, driving Ubers, raising kids, going to church. They don't have privilege. They have fear. They have debt. They have doctors who don't listen. They have families who disown them. I think about a friend of mine. She transitioned 10 years ago, lost her marriage, lost her job. Her own parents wouldn't speak to her for 3 years. She's a woman. She's always been a woman, but she had to fight like hell to be seen as one. And now she's finally in a good place. And she watches this comedian special and cries. Not because she's offended, because she's exhausted. Because she's tired of being a punchline in someone else's story about free speech. The comedian would say, it's just jokes. I'm not your enemy. The real enemy is the people who won't let us joke. And I get that. I really do. Comedy needs edge. Comedy needs risk. But there's a difference between risking offense and reinforcing harm. When you tell a joke about trans privilege to 1 million people, you're not just making a point about hypocrisy. You're giving permission. You're telling every person in that audience that it's okay to roll their eyes at trans people. It's okay to see them as demanding, unreasonable, entitled. And that matters because words have weight. Words become attitudes. Attitudes become actions. And actions for trans people can be fatal. Now, I'm not saying this comedian is responsible for violence. Of course not. But I am saying that when you have a massive platform, you have a responsibility to think about the second-order effects of your jokes. Not because you should censor yourself, because you should be honest. And the honest truth is that trans people are not a powerful group. They are a tiny, marginalized, overstudied, underprotected group. Punching at them isn't punching up. It's punching sideways at best and down at worst. Let me come back to the comparison one more time. Caitlyn Jenner versus Eminem. The more I think about it, the more I realize why it bothers me. It's not because the analogy is completely wrong. It's because the analogy is incomplete. Yes, both had to prove themselves. Yes, both faced skepticism. Yes, both had to learn a new set of social rules. But here's what the comedian leaves out. Eminem chose hip-hop. Caitlyn Jenner didn't choose to be trans. She discovered it, or accepted it, or surrendered to it. But she didn't choose it. No one chooses their gender identity. That's the whole point. And when you compare a choice to an identity, you're already lost. You're comparing apples and something that isn't even a fruit. Eminem could walk away. He could retire. He could make pop music or act in movies or disappear. Caitlyn Jenner can't walk away from being trans. Even if she detransitioned, she would still be a person who lived as a woman. That history doesn't vanish. That identity doesn't go away. So the stakes are fundamentally different. Eminem's career was on the line. And yet, I don't want to dismiss the comedian entirely, because he makes one point that I think is worth sitting with. He says, we've created a culture where you can't ask questions without being called a bigot. And that's true in some spaces. There are online communities where any skepticism about gender theory is met with immediate expulsion. There are young people who are terrified to say, I don't understand, because they'll be labeled transphobic. That's real. That's a problem. Not because trans people are too sensitive, but because shutting down questions doesn't create understanding. It creates resentment. The best comedians ask the questions everyone else is afraid to ask, and this comedian is very good at that. His best work, his truly great work, is about race, about class, about fame, about addiction. He's been a truth teller. He's been a conscience. So when he turns his gaze to trans people and sees only grievance and power, I feel disappointed. Not because he's evil, because he's better than this. He's capable of more nuance. He's capable of holding two ideas at once, that trans people face real violence and that some trans activists can be unreasonable. But he doesn't hold both. He holds one and mocks the other. I think about the audience in that room. I think about the laughter. Some of it is nervous. Some of it is relieved. Some of it is mean. And I wonder, what are they laughing at? Are they laughing at the cleverness of the analogy? Are they laughing at the absurdity of modern discourse? Or are they laughing at trans people? I don't know. Maybe they don't know either. And that's the thing about comedy. It reveals. It reveals what we really think when we're not pretending to be good. And what this comedian reveals in this bit is that a lot of people are tired. Tired of being corrected. Tired of new words. Tired of feeling like they're walking on eggshells. And he gives them permission to say enough. He gives them a hero who says the quiet part out loud. But here's the quiet part that he doesn't say. Being tired doesn't make you right. Feeling annoyed doesn't make you oppressed. And laughing at a joke about trans privilege doesn't change the fact that trans people are still dying, still homeless, still fired, still beaten, still erased. The laughter is a release. But what are we releasing? Tension or compassion? I'm nearing the end of the video now. The comedian wraps up the bit. He says something like, I love everybody. I just don't want to be told what to say. And the crowd applauds. Standing ovation. He bows. He drinks his water. The screen fades to black. And I'm left alone on my couch with my thoughts. And I realize this isn't really about Caitlyn Jenner. It's not really about Eminem. It's about who gets to define reality. Is reality biological? Is reality social? Is reality whatever the most powerful person in the room says it is? The comedian wants to believe that reality is stubborn, that a man is a man, and a woman is a woman, and jokes are jokes. But reality is messier than that. Reality includes trans people. Reality includes pain. Reality includes the fact that a joke that lands in a comedy club can land like a punch in a trans kid's bedroom. So I close my laptop. I sit in the dark. And I don't have a neat conclusion. I don't have a slogan. I just have this. The next time someone says trans privilege, I'm going to ask them to define it. And if they point to a rich reality TV star, I'm going to point to the hundreds of trans women of color who were murdered last year. And I'm going to say, that's not privilege. That's survival. And survival is not a punchline. So that's my commentary. That's what went through my head. That's the story. I don't hate the comedian. I don't love the comparison. I just wish he'd sit with a trans person for an hour. Not to debate, just to listen. Because the best comedy doesn't come from certainty. It comes from curiosity. And right now, I don't hear curiosity. I hear a man who's tired of being told he's wrong. And I get it. But being tired isn't the same as being right.